Mark from the States, Mark from the States, it's Mark from the United States.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Mark from the States. How are we doing today? I'm doing fantastic. I hope you are as well. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate each and every one of you. Come sit on this big fake couch. Today, we're gonna hook up with a channel called Aviation Deep Dive. Alex over there and the rest of his team over at the channel put out some great content, and I am truly blessed that he is giving his okay for us to learn from his videos. Today's video is Why Did America Use British Spitfires? Now, I think if this is where he's going to go with it, before America got into the war officially, weren't there American pilots who weren't flying under the Stars and Stripes? They were flying independently, or through somebody else, maybe through Canada or something. Were flying Spitfires. I think maybe that is it. I think in the past, seen videos that have touched on this topic before, but I'm excited to see this because this is the full story. And I really appreciate Alex and everyone over there. And so, with that said, for what we need to do is go over to his channel and support him, to give him the help he needs to keep making this wonderful content. So, links right below in the description. I've already set it up to where you'll just click on them. It'll take you to this video, or there'll be a link that'll take you to the channel. So please get over there and help him out by liking, subscribing if you would love to see more of his content in your feed. And, just one little like helps these original content creators. We talk about this many times. This is our channel here is just for me to learn from, and for all of you to learn things, because a lot of you have emailed me and commented how, oh my gosh, I didn't know that, or I didn't know it went that way, or slightly knew the story. You know what I mean? So there is some value here. So please go and show your support for our channel by supporting the people we watch, because it's important that you get over there and help them. Thinking about having a live stream this Sunday. Yesterday was my wife's birthday. We had a wonderful day. And the cool thing is my son came in from Sacramento, which is about 6 hours north, capital city of California. And he's here for the weekend, so I'm excited. It's great to have him home. My son Cooper's birthday is Saturday. So, yeah. And then my wedding anniversary is 2 weeks after that. So, yeah, it's a busy month stretch for me and the family, and it's always a wonderful part of time of the year. Another cool thing is it's our yearly pilgrimage to Las Vegas. That happens not this weekend, but next weekend. It's a 3-day holiday for us called Labor Day. It's unofficially the end of summer. It's generally Memorial Day is the unofficial start of summer. Labor Day is the unofficial start, or unofficial ending of summer, I guess. But we go out to Las Vegas every year to do our fantasy football draft, which is the NFL. American football starts the week after that, so we go out there, and I'm in this league with a bunch of friends, and we basically go out to Vegas and just have a lot of fun. You may remember I've done a couple shorts from out there, and I may do the same again just to kind of show you what we're doing. So I'll be gone that weekend, but hopefully I'll be able to kind of chime in a little bit here and there. But as for a live stream, I'm thinking this Sunday, it'll be earlier for you, early for me. We have things that we're doing Sunday, so I need to do it early in the morning. So if you can show up, wonderful. If you can't, it's okay. We'll do it again, and you can join us then. But I'm going to put out a reminder, so just look forward to seeing all of you who can make it on Sunday. With that said, come sit on this big fake couch right next to me, and let's check this video out.
Hello, and welcome to Aviation Deep Dive. The Spitfire was there when Britain needed it most. Holding the line through the Battle of Britain in 1940, it was easily the equal of the Messerschmitt Bf-109E and became a symbol of the nation's resistance in the face of joyless, jackbooted tyranny.
Yeah.
It was also the one that had the greatest psychological hold over its German opponents. Shouts of "Achtung Spitfire" were the words no German pilot wanted to hear during the battle. Possibly that and "my fuel is running out." And Adolf Galland famously asked for a squadron of Spitfires, even if the context of the remark is slightly misunderstood. What people don't know is that it was also there when America needed it, or more precisely, it was there when American pilots needed it. Explaining this involves a quick history lesson. Americans had already flown the Spitfire long before the first ex-RAF examples flew in the stars and bars markings in 1942. A test aircraft had been sent to America in 1939, and numerous volunteer American pilots had flown with the RAF long before, with around 11 pilots entering the RAF's rank in time for the Battle of Britain, and others joining in the months that followed.
Okay, so I knew that. I didn't know they sent one to America as a test plane. That's new to me. But I did know that, I thought it was more than 11, but for the Battle of Britain. But interesting. I didn't know they kept flying them either. He said 1942. So, already. Picking up what you're putting down, Alex. Thank you, buddy.
The legality of this was a slightly grey area. Many went to Canada and joined the RCAF, and others simply said they were Canadian to avoid problems with US authorities.
Huh.
What was more certain was that they could not wear the rocker that aircrew wore on the upper part of their battle dress saying which country they were from, since the United States was not formally at war with Germany. Instead, they sported a patch with the American Eagle below the letters ES, short for Eagle Squadron. There were 3 of these so-called Eagle Squadrons in the RAF with American pilots, 71, 121, and 133. In August 1941, 71 Squadron transitioned from Hurricanes to the Spitfire Mark II, and then the Spitfire Mark 5B. Number 121 Squadron made the same transition in November 1941, and 133 was also first equipped with Hurricanes and made the switch to Spitfires while it was stationed in Northern Ireland. It was 133rd Squadron who were involved in what was known as the Morlaix disaster, which wiped out the entire unit. After re-equipping with the more advanced Spitfire Mark 9, they were sent on a mission to escort B-17s from the 301st Bombardment Group, who was sent to bomb the Morlaix-Bourgogne airfield in Brittany. A combination of heavy cloud and a 100-mile-an-hour tailwind blew the squadron further south than they knew, which meant that when they came to fly back, they were now flying into a headwind. This made the mistake Brest for the English coast, and as they descended through a gap in the clouds, they were immediately fired on by the German defenders. 4 pilots were killed, 6 became prisoners of war, and pilot officer Robert E. Smith managed to evade capture and made it back to England in January 1943. One pilot, Flight Lieutenant Edward Brettel, was later murdered along with 49 others by the Gestapo in Danzig after the so-called Great Escape. Just 1 Spitfire made it home. This 12th aircraft was flown by pilot officer Richard Norton Beatty, who crashed in Devon due to fuel starvation and was critically injured. He recovered and saw out the war with the 336th Fighter Squadron of the US AAF. The other inadvertent survivor was the commanding officer of 133rd Squadron, Red McAlpin. He had been in London to discuss his transfer to the US AAF on the day of the Morlaix disaster, and was later to lead the 336th Fighter Squadron, the same unit that Pilot Officer Beatty was from. McAlpin ended the war with 12 victories, as well as the British Distinguished Flying Cross. The loss in 42, making up the 31st Fighter Group. The plan seems to have been for them to use the Aerocobra, but the experience of 601 Squadron, who flew exactly one combat sortie with the aircraft before abandoning it, suggested that this might not be a very good idea. Instead, they picked up the Spitfire Mark Vs from Atcham and High Urkel and started intensive training. So intense that 20 Spitfires were written off during it. At least one American pilot elected to stay in the RAF.
That looks so weird with the American star on there. That color just looks so out of place. But yeah, okay. I was a little confused from before where he mentioned 11 pilots. I guess that was just for the Battle of Britain. The Eagle Squadron had, of course, more than that. But I was like, oh, it took me a little bit to kind of let that sink in to my thick skull here.
During it. At least one American pilot elected to stay in the RAF. However, Arthur Art Donahue had traveled to Canada and claimed to be the Canadian so he could join the RCAF, and arrived in the ranks of the RAF in time for the Battle of Britain, where he flew the Spitfire and later took part in the Battle of Singapore. He disappeared after ditching in the English Channel, having attacked a Junkers Ju-88. In 1942, he had written to his parents that, "My life may not be long, but it will be wide." The 3 squadrons of the 31st Fighter Group were joined by the 52nd Fighter Group, which also received Spitfires as part of the same reverse Lend-Lease arrangement. As they continued to work towards combat readiness, training detachments were sent to West Hampnet in West Sussex. On August 8th, Spitfires from the 309th were on gunnery practice when they encountered a lone Focke-Wulf FW-190 over Shoreham. Major Harrison Thing damaged it, setting up the first claim over a German aircraft by the US AAF in World War II. There would be fighter sweeps over northern France, and an operation known as Circus 204. A circus was the RAF codename for a daytime bomber attack with heavy fighter escort. And this mission saw the 12 Spitfires from the 31st Fighter Group tangle with as many as 8 Focke-Wulf FW-190s. Since the Spitfires enjoyed a height advantage, the Focke-Wulfs seemed to have been caught by surprise, and 2 were damaged, including one by Major McNichol of the 307th. But this was just a foretaste of what was to come with Operation Jubilee. The objective of Operation Jubilee was to see how practical it would be to capture and hold a seaport in northwest Europe, and to demonstrate to Stalin that the Allies were serious about relieving some of the pressure on his armies. Dieppe was selected as the target, with the initial landings taking place on the 19th of August 1942, and around 66 fighter squadrons were involved in covering the attack, including the Eagle Squadrons, about to depart for the US AAF. Lieutenant Frank Hill...
That takes the advantage away, right? Is that how I'm understanding that? The Spitfire normally would have a height advantage because they can fly higher. You'll have to explain that. But I believe that's how I'm understanding that. But since they were required to come down to cover the landings, that then allowed the German aircraft to be able to fly higher and attack from above.
Hill remembered that around 12 Focke-Wulf FW-190s fell on them at around 8 in the morning, shooting down one of the Spitfires. In his combat report, Hill wrote, "My number 3 man called that he was going down, and I saw him bail out, and his parachute was streaming behind him for a good 6 to 10 seconds before it really opened up. He landed in the water
scary.
and 2 boats were approaching him. It was soon after that we came home." The 308th lost 2 pilots that day. First Lieutenant Buck Ingraham was shot down in the sea and was captured when his dinghy washed ashore, and Second Lieutenant William Dabney was also shot down, but never seen again. AAF aircraft in the European theatre came when Lieutenant Sam Junkin shot down a Focke-Wulf FW-190 and was then shot down himself seconds later and bailed out before being rescued by an Allied boat.
Well, that's good.
On the eve of the battle, Harry Strawn, who was one of the pilots with the 309th Fighter Squadrons, had written in his diary, "Some 31 fighter squadrons, 2,000 Canadian soldiers, commandos, bombers, and boats are going to make landings in the town of Dieppe on the coast of France. We are going to destroy the entire town and hold it for one day. Our job is to escort the boats across the channel. Of course, we will be fighting FW-190s all day. It should be a big show and my first fight. I'll need strength tomorrow." And after the operation was concluded, he added, "I guess this is the big day in my life, for I got a real taste of aerial warfare. I got up at 3 a.m. this morning, and by the time we got to the field, everyone was really busy. Planes warming up in the dark, and others in the air on their way to Dieppe, France for the big day. Most of us were joking and laughing, but I rather imagine it was to cover up their nerves.
Yeah.
I know I felt a bit on edge and a little shaky. Our first mission was at 9 a.m. in the morning, and the boys really ran into hell in the skies. When they came back, 2 of our planes were missing. Collins bailed out about 5 miles from the French coast after getting his engine shot up by an FW-190. Junkin got a 20mm shell in his shoulder and bailed out. Both were picked up by boat. The ground flak was terrific, but it didn't bother me much. The town was completely destroyed and we lost 3 planes, but all pilots got back. As for myself, you might say I was born under a lucky star. At least I believe I was. With things as hot as they were, I can't understand how I got out, but I did. The Germans are plenty good and have a good fighter plane in the FW-190, but I believe we are better. Of course, it doesn't pay to get cocky, for about that time you'll wake up to find that you've had it. You must keep your eyes open, all the time looking around, for in most cases they come down on you from above out of the sun. We have a good plane to meet with them with in the Spitfire, and one the British should be very proud of.
Very cool.
For myself, I hope I never have to fly any other make in this man's war. The 31st Fighter Group had flown 123 sorties and lost 8 pilots, with 5 of them posted as missing. And for the ground forces, Dieppe was even more costly. Around 5,000 Canadians were used in the attack, and over 3,000 were killed, wounded, or captured. And of the 1,000 British commandos who joined them, a quarter were lost. For the 31st, it was the end of their Northern European War, as they were transferred along with the 52nd Fighter Group for the war in the Mediterranean. The 4th Fighter Group stayed behind, and for about 6 months was the only American fighter unit in Europe. They made the transition to Republic P-47 Thunderbolts, flying their last Spitfire sortie on March 16, 1943. The bulk of the American Spitfires were now headed south. Both the 31st and 52nd now departed by sea for Gibraltar to take part in the Anglo-American invasion of North Africa, codenamed Operation Torch. Its objective was to take Morocco and Algeria out of the war and put pressure on Rommel's forces in Tunisia. Both Morocco and Algeria were French colonies, where the government was loyal to the puppet French regime that the Germans had installed when they conquered the country in 1940. It was thought that the French regimes in Morocco and Algeria might not put up any resistance if they were invaded, but this turned out not to be the case. At dawn on November 8, 1942, the 31st Fighter Group headed for the French airfield at Tafroui in Iran, in western Algeria, and were about to land there when they were attacked by 3 Dewatine D-520 aircraft, killing Lieutenant Joe Byrd Jr. Major Harrison Thing led a swift response, and Byrd's squadron mates shot down all the French aircraft. One of the Dewatines was brought down by Lieutenant Carl Payne, who would end the war having shot down aircraft flying for 4 nations: France, Germany, Italy, and Japan.
That's crazy.
Byrd's wing insignia survived the crash, however, and were later worn by his nephew, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Byrd, who amassed 3,000 flight hours on the F-4 Phantom and F-16 Fighting Falcon. Lieutenant Claude McRaven later remembered what happened. After we got our billets, we went to the flight line and learnt that our Spitfires awaited us. Early on November 8th, we were herded into a briefing room and told we were going to Oran in northwest Algeria, and that paratroopers had jumped on a nearby aerodrome named Tafroui, and they had met with a lot of resistance. We were told to land at this base if there was a large white cross at the end of the landing runway. The white cross was there, so we started to land, and the 308th was first. As I landed, in came 4 Dewoitine D520 Vichy French fighters, and they strafed all around me. I immediately told Major Thing. He and Red Flight swarmed all over them and shot 3 of them down. The French caught one of our pilots just as he touched down, causing him to crash and burn. There is no way a Dewoitine could ever shoot down a Spitfire unless they caught him while landing.
I was going to say.
Our order of business was to gas up and be ready for any emergency, which was not long in coming. A recce reported that a column was on the move towards Tafroui. When our flight got to the scene, it was a comical sight. There were old coal-burning trucks with some pulling the others. There were Frenchmen on bicycles, and we saw a few motorcycles. There were French World War I type tanks, some 75mm artillery pieces, and glory be, no anti-aircraft fire.
That's gotta
It was
be
a turkey
relief.
shoot. I flew 3 missions that day. If we should hit a tank in the rear, it just blew up. I flew on Charlie Wilson's wing, and he found a gasoline truck hiding in the hedgerow. It made quite a fire. McRaven was not joking. One attacking Spitfire flying at very low level was reportedly splattered with body parts after a vehicle had exploded.
Oh, gosh.
The French quickly signed an armistice in November and hurriedly changed sides. The 52nd Fighter Group flew down to Tafroui, or rather, most of them did. 6 Spitfires were lost when they ran out of fuel on the long transit flight from Gibraltar. Once they had arrived, their 2nd Fighter Squadron moved east, far along the Algerian coast to Beaune, and was quickly involved in defending the harbour. Captain Jimmy Peck was one of the pilots who intercepted a Stuka raid on Beaune and shot down an escorting Focke-Wulf FW-190. Moving to Beaune meant that the fighter groups were now starting to engage with elite Luftwaffe units from Jagdgeschwader 2 and Jagdgeschwader 77, with JG-2 flying the Focke-Wulf FW-190 and JG-77 the latest Messerschmitt. Despite this, Lieutenant Norman Bowler shot down Lieutenant Wilhelm Klinius of JG-2 over El Kala. He was one of the Luftwaffe's Experten and already had 114 kills, but was now badly wounded, bailing out of his stricken Messerschmitt Bf-109 G2 and spending 24 hours in the sea before becoming a prisoner of war. In February, 12 Spitfires of the 4th Fighter Squadron were escorting Airacobras, flying in the ground attack role, when the FW-190s of JG-2 struck. Flown by Kurt Boeligen and Eric Rudolfer, they accounted for 3 of the Spitfires without loss. As Morocco and Algeria were out of the war and on the sides of the Allies, there was now a push to force Rommel out of North Africa entirely. French forces in Tunisia were quickly replaced by the Germans, and fighting broke out between the two sides as the French forces, who were now on the side of the Allies, retreated to the hills. Montgomery was driving hard through Libya to the east, and the pincer set up by Torch-inspired campaign in the west was starting to close. It was clear that Tunisia, caught in the middle, would be his final stand. In mid-February, Rommel did the unthinkable and went on the offensive at Kasserine Pass, which forced a hurried Allied retreat. The 31st Fighter Group's new base at Thelept in Tunisia even looked like it might be overrun. Colonel Fred Dean was the commander of the group, and he remembered, "We were very successful in getting out of our base, even if we didn't have much warning. We had from 2 a.m. until 9 a.m. We had everything packed and ready to go." I was one of the last flights to take off from Thelept. Shells were landing all over the mess area and in the ravine on the side of the hill. all 3 squadrons in the group had several bases to go in the next couple of weeks. The tide of battle slowly started to turn in the Allies' favor, and as the Luftwaffe tried to mount attacks in support of the ground forces, there were opportunities for more victories. 2 squadrons of the 31st bounced a large formation of Junkers Ju-87s with an escort of Bf-109s, shooting down 4 Stukas and a 109 for the loss of 1 Spitfire. The following day, the 52nd Fighter Group shot down 7 109s and 190s, as well as 2 Junkers Ju-88s. Captain Arthur Vinson's wingman was Captain Norman MacDonald, who had led an unusual life, which some rumors suggest had included being in a motorcycle gang. He wrote the following in his combat report for the 22nd of March 1943, which is featured in the book Spitfires and Yellowtail Mustangs by Tom Ivey and Paul Ludwig. On our return trip from Mizuna, Lieutenant Beard called out 2 Ju-88s directly above us heading southeast. I saw the enemy aircraft at about 1,000 feet above us, and I climbed directly up at them. They were flying a 2-ship formation slightly echeloned to the right. I leveled off behind and slightly below their number 2 ship. From 50 yards with 5 degrees deflection to the right, I opened up with cannon and machine guns. My first cannon shells knocked out his right motor and the engine caught fire. Then the cannon shells exploded in the cockpit and along the fuselage, and the whole ship seemed to explode in midair. It went down burning. In all, I gave him about 4 seconds of cannon and machine gun fire. I then closed on the number 1 aircraft, who apparently had not seen me yet, and from a range of 25 yards, I opened up with cannon and machine guns with a 4-second burst. I set his right motor on fire. His right wing dropped and my cannon fire hit his left motor, setting it on fire also. Then I saw several other strikes of cannon fire along his fuselage. The plane went into a spin towards the ground. I looked around and saw the first Ju-88 hit the ground in flames. On the 3rd of April 1943, Arnold Vinson led the 2nd Fighter Squadron in a sweep over El Guettar. At about 5:30 in the afternoon, the unit came across 12 Stukas and 6 fighters from JG-77 who were escorting them. MacDonald continues. As my flight was nearest the Stukas, we went after the farthest formation. They were very slow, so we caught up with them easily. I closed to within 25 to 30 yards of the trailing Ju-87 and opened up with both cannons and machine guns, using about 5 degrees of deflection. A 2 to 3 second burst was sufficient. The motor belched black smoke and slight flame. The aircraft dove down to the left and flew straight into the ground from about 1,000 feet. I closed to the same distance on the next Stuka, and using a similar angle of deflection, opened up with cannon and machine guns in 3-second bursts. The aircraft erupted into flames and broke into pieces in midair. The third victim was about 500 yards ahead. I closed on him easily. He was in a slight climb. Again, my range was no more than 35 yards, with very slight right deflection from slightly below. The rear gunner was firing intensely at me. I opened up with cannon and machine guns, again firing 3-second bursts. Just as we entered a cloud, great chunks of his propeller and parts of the aeroplane flew back, just missing me. When I came out of the cloud, the Stuka was spinning into the ground, emitting much smoke and with pieces flying off. Vinson also scored a Stuka kill, but then got into difficulties with the escorting Messerschmitts. He was protecting MacDonald's tail when 3 got in behind him and shot him down. While Vinson bailed out, he must have been seriously injured, because 2 days later the Germans returned his body. On April 30th, Major Frank Hill was leading the 31st Fighter Group's 309th Squadron as close cover for the 18 North American B-25 Mitchells, with the 308th as top cover. We flew from Les Surs to the coast, then up towards Cape Bon, he remembered. As we neared the Cape, we could see 2 large vessels making large wakes in the water. We were supposed to go around the Cape and go into the Gulf of Tunis to bomb some shipping that was in the harbor. But here there were 2 very large ships, so the bomber commander decided to lay their eggs there.
Lay their eggs.
Just as we were making our first bombing run, we saw 9 Me-109s above us and to the right. and a fight could see the Inferno 20 miles away. We flew back to home base with the 109s pursuing us most of the way, but they missed and we made it back to the celebrations at our base. A few days later, the 31st Fighter Group got into a fight with BF 109s and Macchi 202s, ending with Lieutenant Colonel Thing and Major Frank Hill becoming aces. Hill would end up as the leading USAAF Spitfire ace with 7 kills, and the unit would end the campaign with a total of 61 kills. Arnold Vinson had become an ace, albeit posthumously, along with Norman MacDonald. They were soon joined by another, Lieutenant Sylvan Field, meaning that the 52nd Fighter Group was now home to 3 Spitfire aces and would claim a total of 86 victories for the campaign.
Wow.
The Africa Corps surrendered on the 13th of May, meaning that the 2 fighter groups who would now be used in the invasion of Sicily, 100 miles away across the Mediterranean. They would, however, be flying different Spitfires. Previously, they had flown aging Mark 5s, which makes their victories over the Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs all the more impressive. Now they would have the latest Mark 9s and Mark 8s. There was initial resistance to the Mark 8 over the Mark 9, simply because it had a lower number, but purists see the Mark 8 as the better fighter, with its retractable tail wheel, improved fuel load, and stronger airframe. Whatever their qualities, they were easily the equal of their opponents. The Merlin engines were operated, and crucially, the 303 guns were replaced with 50 caliber versions. They were also given bomb racks. Landings on Sicily took place on July 9, 1943, with the Spitfires moving down to Malta to give air support. The following day, the 31st Fighter Group shot down 7 enemy aircraft as Sicily was quickly taken. The invasion of the Italian mainland started on September 3rd, with the 31st heavily involved. They flew support over the Salerno beachhead from Milazzo, an airfield on the northern coast of Sicily, and then moved over to Monte Corvino to the east of Salerno itself. It was decided that the 31st would stay as the interceptor squadron, but that the 52nd would now work as fighter bombers. For the rest of December, the 31st scored 7 more kills, and then the Anzio campaign started. The objective of the campaign was to...
I had no idea. This is all like blowing me away here. Excuse me. I didn't know. Well, let's try to recap here. Eagle Squadron, yes. Battle of Britain, they flew in. The limited amount of pilots that flew in that, yes. Then the formation of the Eagle Squadron, or maybe the Eagle Squadron was before that. I don't know. I don't remember. Then the Americans had a lot of Spitfires to use still. It's just kind of confusing in a way, but these same planes end up going down to the battle in Africa, North Africa. That I didn't know. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm like, dang, so much information here. I did not know they were flying Spitfires. Americans were. In North Africa and then into Italy. It's just kind of, crazy. It's hard. I'm sure a lot of you already knew that, but to me, that seems like it's new information. I love the fact that these pilots were able to keep the plane as they were moved around, even the ones that came into flying them in the first place with no country representation. And then once they were in the American Air Force, they were still able to keep the plane and fly. I didn't realize that the Americans flew the Spitfire. Now, granted, the Spitfire was the best aircraft in the sky at the time, for sure. So, if you're a pilot, why wouldn't you go back to the, P-40 or the P-47? Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, they're capable and all, but Spitfire way better. Just buying your time until the P-51 comes around. They probably, a lot of pilots I'm sure wanted to fly that, but even more so when they put a Rolls-Royce engine in it. That's when it really took off. But this is it's kind of, I don't want to say it's mind-blowing, but it's certainly informative because I didn't know. There's a lot of information coming at me, but hopefully some new things for you as well.
To mount an amphibious landing on Italy's west coast that would give the Allies a chance to seize Rome without the need to slog up the country. It also meant that the 52nd Fighter Group was now being used to protect the Allied fleet from attack. As the troops landed, 2nd Fighter Squadron intercepted around 50 Heinkel HE-111s that were armed with torpedoes, destroying 7 and forcing the rest to turn back. And on the next day, it intercepted 6 Dornier Do-217s loaded with Fritz X anti-shipping missiles, shooting 2 down.
Dang.
At the start of February 1944, part of the 31st Fighter Group moved to the airfield at Nettuno, near to Anzio, and in range of the German guns. 4 fighters were lost to the artillery, and the commander of the 307th Fighter Squadron, Virgil Fields, himself an ace, was killed by marauding Messerschmitts. For Captain Floyd J. Rodmeyer, it was not a pleasant time. The 307th was designated as the Assault Squadron. A runway of sorts was bladed out of the beachhead area, and the 307th operated from there. Another debacle. Our squadron was being shelled by German artillery. I remember hearing of one incident where a flight of Spits was taxiing out to take off when a shell landed in front of one.
Oh, man.
Fortunately, the shell was a dud and only made a large depression in the ground.
Wow.
After many days,
Lucky.
the 307th was ordered to evacuate. For the next several weeks, the majority of our missions were over Anzio. There were a few escorts for the B-25s and B-26s, but most of the times we were defending Anzio real estate. The Luftwaffe ran many missions against us, and we were frequently outnumbered. In late January, I was on one flight where we got heavily involved with 109s and 190s, 8 in count, and we were 6 in number. The CO shot down one 109, but my element leader shot down another FW-190. I was diving down behind my element leader, trying to cover him when everything went black. I don't know how long I was out, but when I came to, my plane was in a very steep dive and going very fast.
What the
and my
heck?
altitude was less than 6,000 feet. I leveled out and checked my instruments and everything seemed okay, and I started climbing for altitude. There was a lot of wind noise in the cockpit, and I saw this oblong hole in my bubble canopy, this hole being about 16 inches long and 11 inches high. Nothing else seemed out of place, so I headed back to base unescorted. I found out that a 109 which I hadn't seen had come up behind me and took a quick shot at me, blowing a hole with one of his 20mm shells. The fighting over Anzio was perhaps the most intense of the war, and was also the end of the two fighter groups' relationship with the Spitfire. They both started converting to the Mustang, with the 31st receiving theirs in March 1944, and the 52nd receiving theirs in April. In both cases, the Spitfires had a fitting swan song. The 52nd shot down 3 Messerschmitt Bf-109Gs out of a formation of 6 as they escorted bombers over Orvieto, while the 31st bounced a large formation of FW-190s equipped with bombs, shooting down 1 and scattering the rest. There are 2 final postscripts to the story of Spitfires in American service that show just how versatile the aircraft proved to be. 2 groups operated it in the photo reconnaissance role. The 7th and 68th photo groups operated the PR Mark 11, a stripped-down Mark 9 with extra fuel tanks, which gave it a range of nearly 1,400 miles, more than enough for a return trip from Berlin.
Heck yeah.
While assessing bomb damage was the work of the 7th, the 68th was principally used in support of Operation Torch and the campaign in Italy. Anyone interested in this work with the USAAF should take a look at the documentary Spitfire 944 about the crash landing of the Spitfire mentioned in the title and its pilot. and Spitfires also, improbably, served with the US Navy. In May 1944,
What?
18 pilots of the Cruiser Support Squadron VCS-7 went into training to help naval batteries to target German troop concentrations on D-Day, flying from the Royal Naval Air Station at Lyon-Solent in the company of other Spitfires from the RAF and Fleet Air Arm. The plan was for the aircraft to fly in pairs, with one acting as the spotter and the other as the weaver, helping to protect it from enemy aircraft. With the Spitfires tasked with flying in narrow band between 1,500 feet and 8,000 feet, the work was phenomenally dangerous, and at least 6 Spitfires were brought down by flak. None, however, were shot down by the Luftwaffe. The squadron flew about 200 sorties over the next 3 weeks from D-Day to the capture of the port of Cherbourg on July 26th, by which time German forces were pushed back out of range of naval batteries. It makes for a strange postscript to the Spitfire story, but an oddly fitting one. To the British, the Spitfire occupies a privileged place as the iconic symbol of the country's wider war effort. To the Americans, the Mustangs or B-17s of the 8th Air Force sum up the US AAF's sacrifice in the European skies. But the role of the Spitfire is unremarked. That seems unfair, as it was the aircraft that gave the first brave arrivals onto Britain's shores a mount worthy of their talents as airmen,
Heck yeah.
and lent important extra weight to Allied firepower from Iran to Anzio. The exploits of their pilots deserve to be looked at again, and, just like the more famous forebears, the American few have earned their place in Spitfire history. A huge thanks to my patrons on screen now for supporting the channel, and thank you so much for watching this video of Aviation Deep Dive. Consider liking and subscribing for more weekly content, and please also consider supporting us on Patreon. See you in the skies.
Please go support Alex over there at Aviation Deep Dive. It's a great channel. It's a great channel. I mean, it gave me a lot of information. A lot of it, hopefully it's stuck, but a lot of the things I didn't know. I didn't know they had flown, Americans had flown Spitfires in North Africa or Italy, for that matter. I didn't know it was a staple, really, in the Air Force for a while. Crazy. I knew, about the early on. I knew a little bit about the Eagle Squadron, but I didn't know how extensive that was. So it's wild. I loved all the memories, I guess, the writings from the pilots. I just thought it just kind of gives you a frame of mind that they're in. It's just, you have to have really big cojones to be a fighter pilot, I imagine. It's one of the things that me personally couldn't imagine for sure. Wow. I hope you enjoyed this. This was a good video. Please go support Alex over at his channel. It's really important that you get over there. Links, as mentioned, in the description below. We're going to try to do a live stream this Sunday. I'm going to try to do it around maybe 8 o'clock my time, which would put it about 4 o'clock your time, I guess, in the afternoon. So hopefully you can come and hang out, and we'll talk to you then. But I'm sure I'll have some more videos before then. So hope everybody's happy, healthy, and safe. Thanks so much for coming, and take care. All right. Bye.
Mark from the States, Mark from the States, it's Mark.